Good evening.
Good evening.
Happy New Year. Welcome to citizens, guests, council, and staff. This is 2015 now, and it happens to be the quasi-centennial celebration year for the city of Littleton. So with that, City Clerk, take the roll.
Mayor Cernanek.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
Here.
Councilmember Brinkman. Councilmember Cole.
Here.
Councilmember Stallman.
Here.
Councilmember Stein.
Here.
Councilmember Valdez.
Present.
Thank you. If you could please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council, we do have one change to the agenda for this evening. Previously identified item 7D is absent from the schedule for this evening. It will be taken up in the special session next week. With that, any other agenda items for consideration? Okay. Thank you. City Attorney.
Do we need a motion for approval of the agenda? I'm not on. Now? You can hear me? Okay. I'm aware that a question has been raised concerning the adoption of Ordinance 54 at the last meeting. So, City Attorney, I wanted to clarify for the record.
It's still hard to hear you.
You still can't hear me?
Try the other one.
Doug? Yeah, we're down.
You're down too?
Yeah, mine's on. I can't. He's coming.
Try now. There we go.
There we go. Thanks.
I'm aware that a question has been raised concerning the adoption of Ordinance 54 at the last meeting. So, City Attorney, I wanted to clarify for the record. The motion was made following consideration of the proposed ordinance as part of the announced agenda item for that ordinance, and there was no indication that Council had taken up a new agenda item or that it was no longer considering that ordinance. So the Clerk's Council Journal and the published ordinance correctly reflect this.
Okay. And with that, looking for a motion on the certification of minutes.
I have a motion. I move to approve, based on the clerk's certification, the December 30th video as the minutes for the December 30th, 2014 special meeting of the City Council.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on certification of the minutes. Council ready to vote?
Yep.
Jerry?
I did. Not.
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you. We now go to citizen comments. Unscheduled appearances are an opportunity for any citizen to express opinions or ask questions regarding city services, council policies, or other matters of community concern that are not part of the scheduled agenda. We do have one scheduled public hearing this evening. Generally, an immediate response should not be expected. Typically, issues are referred to city staff for follow-up information or research, and then reported back to the council and the individual that initiated the comment or inquiry. If any citizen would like to speak during unscheduled public appearances, citizen comments, please complete a green citizen card, which is located at the table at the entrance to the council chambers, and please provide the green card to the city clerk or leave it at the podium. Is there anyone that would like to approach and speak? Dave.
I'm Dave Schwan. I live in District 3. Good evening, Council. I possess a special software program from the developers of the Disgronificator that translates distributed organic fertilizer, otherwise known as manure, into English. I used it to translate the letter you received from Littleton Strong. It translated into 2 points. We, Littleton Strong, want our subsidy. Number 2, we, Littleton Strong, watched you, the council, ignore your resolution not to proceed with urban renewal if all taxing entities didn't agree. And now don't trust you to honor your resolution stating you will not use eminent domain and condemnation. The explanation of plans versus projects and projects versus plan was both entertaining and reminiscent of "it all depends on what is." Withdrawals from council's account of trust have been in the millions, and deposits have been in pennies and nickels. A wise man once said, when you're in the bottom of a pit, the best thing to do is stop digging. And now in my remaining time, I will switch to electioneering. But since I will impersonate either Kay Watson from Littleton Strong or Robert Golden of South Metro Chamber impersonating Jonathan Gruber, Littleton voters are too stupid to understand how good this is for them. I don't expect, except when they vote for this council, I don't expect you'll shush me. Congratulations.
Thank you. Is anyone else? Frank?
Thank you, Doug. Good evening, City Council. My name is Frank Atwood, and I live at 7094 South Castilla Street. I can be reached at 720-260-1493 if you have any questions. I have one question that I do expect a response to, and that is, when is the next election commission meeting? Also, I'd like to remind Littleton citizens again to apply for boards and commissions. The deadline for boards and commissions is Saturday, the 31st of January, and I encourage you to go to the city website to find the details to apply, and if you're looking for more details, do Google Citizens for Rational Development. Last week, I left you with the question, who will tell the emperor he has no clothes, and will the emperor listen? These questions were motivated by the following insider advice. You have a choice. You can be an insider or you can be an outsider. Outsiders can say whatever they want, but people on the inside don't listen to them. Insiders, however, get lots of access and a chance to push their ideas. People, powerful people, listen to what they have to say. But insiders also understand one unbreakable rule. They don't criticize other insiders. This week, as a follow-up, I speculate on the question, who will tell the mayor he's passing a second reading different from the first without any amendments being made or passed? Last week's motion was not consistent with the first reading proposed charter change, and no amendments were made. Granted, I did hear something that I think was an explanation, but I'm still not certain what I heard. And I look forward to seeing minutes explaining what I heard rather than just trying to decipher the video. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Anyone else? Pam?
Happy New Year, Council. I'm Pam Chadbourne. I live at Crestline in Nevada in District 1. Wasn't going to talk tonight, but you already approved this. I can't do anything about it, but I'm going to ask you to do something about it. You approved a council journal for the December 30th special meeting. And if I read it right, if I see it right, it has a record of the proposed second reading and then the council vote. I think I read everything right. It was a public hearing. I'm one of the people, the public, who spoke. And yet the council journal has no record of the public comment. Now, if I were in your chairs, that would be wrong to me. I would not accept it. If there's a public hearing, it should be recorded in the council journal. It is your journal. And you should care about what we say, even if it's only a record of so many citizens spoke for and so many citizens spoke against. That would be the minimum, but I think preferably there should be a record of the people who spoke and what they advocated you to do. Because the public hearing is one of the ways that we communicate with you, and it should be important to you to care what we say, and record what we say, and think about it, and have it down on record for future reference. So I think I'm right about that. I can't believe that wasn't there. And I'm going to ask you to, in the future, certainly when there's public hearings, get that in the journal. It's your journal. You should care and get it in there. And frankly, I would amend what you did tonight because that was an important vote, an important issue. And I would suggest that you actually reintroduce it and amend that journal to include the public comments. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Pam. The minutes are actually the recorded element as far as those, and we provided a certification for that. The journal is a statutory required item that is subject to the city clerk's responsibility on that. And the motion tonight was a certification of the minutes, not of the journal. So, anyone else this evening? Mr. Clark.
At the December 2nd public hearing on the Littleton Boulevard Urban Renewal Plan, Councilman Bruce Beckman, asked a question which exemplifies the confusion around blighting and the abuse of urban renewal through blighting in Littleton. Mr. Beckman said, "I've looked at the conditions that must be met in order for us to proceed with urban renewal, but I hear the reference to, and I don't have all the wording, but that it's basically a menace to the public safety, health, welfare, morals, or whatever." And I'm wondering where that statement comes and how that applies to the designation for urban renewal, which we've been basing on these 11 or 12 conditions. He went on to say, because there seems to be confusion on that, we have been working with conditions of blight, but I'm hearing another standard being discussed in the public hearing that must be met, and it's an extremely high standard. I'm wondering where that comes from. And the answer is that extremely high standard for blighting property was written into the urban renewal law by the legislature to prevent abuses of blighting and the urban renewal law by cities. The legislature considered the requirement so important that it appears 5 different times in the urban renewal law, including the section of blight. It appears in the legislative declarations. It appears in the definitions twice. It appears in section 3125.105.5. It appears in 3125.107. But the requirement that blight rise to the level of being a menace to the public health, safety, welfare, or morals also appears in the Littleton Boulevard Urban Renewal Plan 3 different times. It appears on the second page in the second paragraph. It appears at the beginning of the blight conditions, and it appears at the end of the blight conditions. That was the fourth urban renewal plan that was passed by the council. So they should have read the other urban renewal plans because it appears 3 times in the North Broadway plan. It appears 3 times in the Columbine Square plan. It appears 3 different times in the Santa Fe urban renewal plan. Furthermore, you passed resolutions when you approved each one of those plans and declared those areas as blighted. 4 different resolutions, 1 for each of the plans, and each of those 4 resolutions refers back to the definition of blight in the urban renewal law, which says that the blight conditions must rise to the level of being a menace to the public health, safety, and welfare, and morals. Now, this is a total, by the time that the council had finished reading the Littleton Boulevard plan and the resolution, of 21 different times that requirement occurs. The problem is Mr. Beckman is correct in that the requirement to find blight on a property is an extremely high standard, and it is that way deliberately by the legislature, and one that's obviously not being met. If the council can find the brand new King Supers at Littleton and Broadway as a menace to the public health, safety, and welfare before it is even finished being constructed, then that is an example of not rising to the level, the extremely high level, that's required in the urban renewal law and in the urban renewal plans. Thank you.
Thank you. And Doug, you might recall that the condition surveys apply to the urban renewal plan area, not to every specific property within that area. So, anyone else? Carol?
I'm Carol Brazak, and I live in the 4th District, and the first comment is that all those conditions of blight were found on individual pieces of property, not the entire urban renewal areas. And all you have to do is go back to the addendum of the surveys, and you will see properties listed one by one with their conditions of blight. Or you could go to your Littleton, your vote, and look at the 63 days of blight, and you can read the conditions of the blight properties. I'm here tonight to counter a statement that keeps being made. Mr. Stallman has said repeatedly that there will not be any tax dollars diverted from the school district to the Urban Renewal Authority. That statement is not true. In fact, the TIF agreement with the school district on urban renewal plans, not projects, states that the Urban Renewal Authority will be making refund payments to the school district on a regular basis. There could be no refund to the school district if the Urban Renewal Authority wasn't diverting tax dollars. What happens once the TIF has been collected, the county will actually make an accounting entry that looks like this. In fact, this is an actual record where you can see that the money is transferred from the school district to the Urban Renewal Authority. It was I think in 2008 or 2008, so it was probably 2007 taxes, and it was to the Riverfront Authority to pay off the failed 1980s Riverfront project. But you can see in the first column, there's the collections, and then there's factors, and then you go to the final column, and it shows how much money was diverted to Urban Renewal Authority. This is one page out of many, and this is 1 month out of 12, and we've got years of those transfers or diversion of tax dollars. I think what Mr. Stallman is trying to say is that they have negotiated a deal with the school district that will not result in a funding shortfall for the school district. That is because the state, that means the good taxpayers of the state of Colorado, will be paying for our schools twice. Once before the TIF is diverted, and again once the school district determines that they are short funding. then the state is obligated to backfill for that loss. Currently, it is estimated that $81 million a year are being used by the state to backfill school funding statewide due to urban renewal projects. Bottom line, tax dollars are diverted from schools to urban renewal, and the taxpayers foot the bill.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move to the consent agenda items. Oh, excuse me, our reports. Almost skipped those. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. It's going to be more than a minute this evening, but I think you'll find it worthwhile. First, we want to show you a quick video in just a second that our staff, Doug's putting it up there, that our staff wrote and produced for use by the Arapahoe County E911 Authority and all of its member agency. The video announces an important new emergency service and features some faces you might recognize. Doug?
Hello, I'm Doug Stevens, Chief of Police for the City of Littleton. We all text. Now you can send an emergency text to 911 within Arapahoe County. Text to 911 can help in situations when a voice call will increase one's danger in the case of limited cell phone signal or for the hearing impaired. Text to 911, now available in Arapahoe County. Remember, call if you can, text if you must. Thank you.
That's being used by all our member agencies here in Arapahoe County. Number two, BMS Library has a new service. Patrons can access their favorite magazines for free using Flipster. Got to stay up with these things, Flipster. It includes 22 titles, including Consumer Reports, People, Entertainment Weekly, and things like Sports Illustrated. 3, Human Resources and the Fire Department have implemented physical agility testing and metabolic assessments, along with new workers' compensation providers for firefighters. The goal is to improve recovery times for employees who are injured at work while reducing the cost to the city. And I know Councilman Stallman participated in these conversations as part of, in conjunction with our fire partners, and we're excited about this. We're really hoping a majority of our workers' comp claims come from the fire department, and we hope to get folks back on duty quicker using this program. Number 4, the Finance Department received the Governor's Finance Officers Association Award for Financial Reporting for the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the 27th consecutive year. Number 5, letters were sent this week to 15 nonprofit groups that serve Littleton citizens who were approved for funding from City Council's discretionary fund. A total of $76,000 was awarded. 6, the new mediation program is off to a strong start. There have already been 8 referrals to mediation, and 2 have been successfully completed with signed agreements on how the parties will move forward. We'll be shooting a video about it next week and are finishing up with an online form for the website so that the community members can send referrals directly to the Conflict Resolution Center. And we're actually going to have our mediator come and present to you guys at a future study session. Number 7, the museum's exhibit, Littleton Goes to War, 1941 to 1945, will close January 26 while staff prepares for its 3rd iteration. It will reopen February 3rd with photographs from the Center of Military History and the museum's collection. 8, there was a nice story in your hub last week about the museum with a headline, Littleton Museum Alive with History. Number 9, permits will be issued this week for Designs by Sundown for their 2-story headquarters next to Breckenridge Brewery. The structure will be a little over 7,000 square feet and is valued at over $1.6 million. 10, the white Main Street holiday lights will stay on through the city's birthday on March 8th. The red tree trunk lights, the snowflakes on the bridge, and the lights on the trees in Bowles Plaza have been turned off. And then I think Doug's going to be ready. And last but not least, there is nothing good that can come from the death of a child. But for those who haven't seen it, this video from 9 News speaks volumes about the quality of the people who work for the city and depth of compassion they have for our citizens. We're incredibly proud of this. So, roll it. And Colleen has no issues.
Well, this next story has both heart and heartache. It's about a 10-year-old boy who died right before Christmas, and a stranger, a police officer, who helped pay for the boy's funeral just because it was the right thing to do. Here is 9 News crime and justice reporter Anastasia Bolton.
He loved everybody. He respected authority, especially our peace officers that serve and protect us, the military.
2 days before Christmas, 10-year-old Isaiah Bird was diagnosed with the flu. Today, was his funeral.
They released us and said it's okay to go home, and I was picking up his prescription, and he wanted to wait in the car because he wasn't feeling good, and then he came walking in there.
Isaiah's dad told us his son walked into a Walgreens and collapsed. Littleton officers Rick Redmond and James Fountain responded, performed CPR.
The ambulance was getting there, and we grabbed them and we ran them out to the ambulance. And we rushed them to the hospital, and when they got to the hospital, we thought everything was okay. And James and I had left. We thought we had a win. We thought the kid would be okay.
A few days later, Officer Redmond was checking out the GoFundMe site and saw that Isaiah had passed, and his family needed help with the funeral. He donated more than $3,200 of his own money.
It's important, man. There's a lot of people hurting right now, and the last thing they need to do is worry about finances. The thing they need to worry about is their son, because that's what matters in this world, is personal relationships. That's the people around you. I don't care what car you drive. I don't care how rich you are. But tell you what things that matters the most is how much the people around you, your family, your friends, those are the most important things in this world. And if you don't have those, you don't have anything as far as I'm concerned.
Isaiah's dad is grieving and grateful, reminding the rest of us to be grateful for the people in our lives.
I would just like to personally thank the Littleton Police Department for their donation, and I would like to thank everyone else who has donated. And just enjoy everybody that's around you.
Anastasia Bolton, 9 News.
Officer Redmond's decision to help with the funeral is a form of paying it forward. Several months ago, a 15-year-old bought lunch for him and his partners. It moved him so much, and he wants people to know how positive and good the community can be.
Mayor, we're just proud. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Councilmember Cole.
After that, I'm not going to say anything. That just moment of silence.
Councilmember Stallman.
I guess just the comments that were, sort of like Peggy. I hate to even bring that up after the video. Certainly respect the comments about funding state schools. Certainly, if anyone's interested, they're welcome to chat with Scott Murphy, the LPS superintendent, who can help people understand how much money was cut from K-12 education over the past several years by the state legislature, doing negative rescissions on an annual basis. The number statewide is in the billions. But the answer to the question of diverting tax money is, let me use a real simple example. When we agreed to help fund the King Soopers redevelopment at Littleton and Broadway, the arrangement we made with them went like this. The existing sales tax dollars that were being generated by that store prior to the redevelopment came to the city of Littleton. New sales tax dollars over and above that prior amount were agreed to be shared with King Soopers 50-50 up to a total of $500,000 to them. So if we had said you can have half of all the sales tax, then we would have been, in plain language, diverting taxes to King Soopers. What we did is we shared new taxes that wouldn't exist but for the new project. It's the same way with the state. Property taxes that go to Littleton Public Schools today will continue to go to Littleton Public Schools if the city of Littleton engages in an urban renewal activity, or Littleton Invest for Tomorrow engages in a specific urban renewal project. New taxes that exist or that come into existence because of an urban renewal project will be shared with Littleton Public Schools based upon negotiated arrangement. It strains credulity to suggest that sharing new taxes forward is the same as diverting existing taxes. So again, I find it misleading to say that we are diverting taxes when in fact all existing taxes will continue to go where they've always gone, And the only taxes that get shared will be new taxes that wouldn't exist except for an urban renewal project. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Valdez.
Yes, and this is just more of a request for our city attorney. Could you email with your comment that you made earlier? Because I don't think I had my listening ears on quite as well, and you spoke sort of fast, and I just need to digest what you said. I think that'd be helpful for me. Each and every day I appreciate our fire department and our men and women that get out there with their badges and guns for us every day. So thank you all of you. Please pass that on to the department. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Brinkman.
No report.
Councilmember Stein.
No report.
Mayor Pro Tem Beckman.
No report.
And my comment regarding Officer Jesse reflects a lot of the character that I see in our departments, and it's nice when good stories get out there. And we'll see what we can do in our year of celebration to do the right things for all of us. And so, thank you. Council, we now move to the consent agenda. Know that there's not any 7D, so with regard to the consent agenda, items can be adopted by one simple motion. All ordinances must be read by title prior to a vote on the motion. Any consent agenda item may be removed at the request of a council member. Item 7A is Resolution 04-2015. It's a resolution specifying the location where notices of public meetings are to be posted and identifying the newspaper where notices and other information required to be published will be printed. This is an annual requirement. Item 7B, Ordinance 05-2015 is an ordinance on first reading regarding requirements for a qualified municipal court of record. Again, this is a state requirement. Item 7C is Resolution 06-2015. It's a resolution supporting the application by Littleton Public Schools for a 2015 Arapahoe County Open Space Grant for the Centennial Academy of Fine Arts. Item 7E is Resolution 02-2015. It's a resolution approving a police recruit training agreement with the City of Lakewood to use the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office and Lakewood Police Department's combined regional academy for recruit police officer training. And item 7F is Resolution 07-2015. It's a resolution approving the Second Amendment to Declaration of Agreement establishing building restrictions in Plum Valley, Douglas County, State of Colorado. Council looking for a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
And just to be specific, that's with regard items 7A, 7B, 7C, 7E, and 7F. Council ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Council, next we move to ordinances for second reading and public hearing. This is regarding Ordinance 50-2014. It's ordinance on second reading, removing the permitting requirement for alarm businesses and providing that the administrative fee related to false alarms requiring fire department response be set by council resolution. City Manager?
I would just say we received no public comment or council comments on this since first reading.
Okay. Council, any questions? This time? Okay, seeing none, we will open the public hearing at 7:05 p.m. There is no one indicated on the public hearing roster. Is anyone looking to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 7:05 and 30 seconds. Council looking for a motion or discussion?
Move to approve an ordinance on second reading, removing the permitting requirement for alarm businesses and providing that the administrative fee related to false alarms requiring fire department response be set by council resolution.
Second.
Okay, motion. Council, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just have one question. So for the city manager, how big of a problem has it been for our city? If you could just maybe highlight that a little bit.
I don't have the exact numbers. So for police, it hasn't been a significant issue, but for fire, we spend a significant amount of time responding to these. And so what we're trying to do in this case is create an incentive for the property owner to resolve the issue on what's causing the false alarm, because typically it's some faulty thing with the alarm system, somebody doesn't set it right or something like that. But right now there's really no disincentive for them to do anything about it. We respond, they feel good about it, there's coverage for it, but it's costing us. We can't respond to other calls. Councilman Stallman's very aware that that's an issue for us as well as our partners about our response time. And if we're out on these calls, we can't respond if a true 911 call comes in. So that's why you see that staggered price going up to say, look, we're going to charge it. We'll come out a few times, and we're going to start charging you, so you're going to start paying attention and address that issue. And obviously on a case-by-case basis, if there's something going on, we'll work with them. But,
all right, thank you.
So, you bet.
Any additional comments or discussion? Seeing none, Council, we have a motion and a second before us. Council ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you, Council. Next, we move to general business. General business agenda item is Resolution 05-2015. It's a resolution authorizing city staff to collect funds from 3 property owners to allow to pay for their respective share of the costs of undergrounding existing utility lines along the south side of East Dry Creek Road. Director Boston.
Good evening, Council. This item dates back as early as 1985 and is a little bit complicated, so I'll spend some time trying to explain it. When properties develop, they're required to place utility lines that are on or adjacent to their property and bury them underground. When properties develop that are in fill locations, many times the adjacent properties have not placed their utilities underground, and as a result, it would be kind of silly and very expensive to do individual parcels one at a time. So back starting in the 1980s, the city staff adopted an agreement with each individual property owner on development and said, when you do develop, you will sign an agreement that at the time that the city dictates the lines be placed underground when other properties do it as well, that you will pay your fair share for that. There was no cost assigned at that time because we have no idea what it would cost to bury the lines. Included with your packet is one item going back to 1985 with Merchants Oil Company, which happens to be the owner of the Sinclair station on the southeast corner of Broadway and Dry Creek Road. This is one of the older ones that we have, and the agreement attached to your communication identifies the fact that this property owner then is responsible for undergrounding all lines on or adjacent to his property when the city states so. There were 2 others, one with Courtesy Acura and another one with the shopping center on the southwest corner of Dry Creek Road in Grant. Turns out that Merchants Oil still owns the Sinclair station. Courtesy Acura still owns their property on Dry Creek Road. However, the shopping center has changed hands at least once, so that the original property owner is not the one that we're dealing with at this time. The reason we want to underground these lines is because of the widening of Dry Creek Road in association with the Littleton Village development. When completed, Dry Creek Road will have 2 lanes in each direction and turn lanes, as well as curb gutter and sidewalk. That was part of the original concept with Littleton Village and using city funds through the impact fees as well as Littleton Village money. The utility lines that are overhead, this is power, cable television, and telephone, are all in the way of the widening of the street. Plus, this gives us the opportunity to build a street with clean area with no overhead utility lines. If we are to go east of Grant Street, it becomes very difficult to bury those lines because you're dealing with individual properties that we would have to bury all the way into the building. That would be not only incredibly expensive, but it might be very difficult to do so. The staff is recommending that we underground only the section from Broadway to Grant Street. At this time, it makes the most sense. The question at this point is, do we impose these agreements on the three property owners? One of the agreements does state that the city council must pass action in order to implement this agreement. The other two relate only to the city doing it, not the city staff or the council, but the city. At this time, we would like to propose to council that you authorize us to implement these three agreements. The total cost for undergrounding the line for each individual property, it's over $440,000. For each individual property, the Sinclair station at the southeast corner of Broadway and Dry Creek is $62,875. The cost for the Acura dealership is $192,823. And the cost to the shopping center is $186,151. In addition to this cost, each individual property owner will have to pay for undergrounding of the telephone line, because that is not covered by any kind of agreement with CenturyLink or their predecessors. Comcast is obligated to go underground at any time the other utilities are buried in the area. So we don't believe there's any cost at all to do that. It is an incredible coordination effort to have all three of these done at the same time, and it may be a while before it actually happens, but it's part of the Littleton Village and Dry Creek Road Improvement Project. The question comes up as to whether or not to charge all three of these properties this amount of money. As I said, one has changed hands at least once since the agreement was signed, and that's the shopping center, and their cost would be $186,000. Xcel Energy is willing to bury these lines as a part of their whole project on Broadway and Dry Creek Road for the Littleton Village development. When that happens, they will actually charge our underground fund the total amount of the $441,000. That is the way the process works. We have over $3 million accumulated in that fund. It's not cash. It's actually credit to Xcel Energy and the city for undergrounding lines in the area. I'm going to give you some alternative possibilities here. One is we can just impose these three agreements on the three property owners and say you will pay this amount, as well as you will pay to CenturyLink whatever they charge to bury their line. We don't expect the CenturyLink one to be terribly expensive because they can share the same trench as Xcel Energy, but there still will be a cost to pay CenturyLink. As I said, Comcast should not charge anything for this effort. Another approach would be to give some generosity to these three property owners and basically discuss with them the possibility of doing it at half cost, realizing one of these agreements is 30 years old. It's going to be quite a shock to them when they get this bill. Courtesy Acura is in the process right now of submitting plans for expansion of their building. They're doing some changes on site. I have already spoken with them about the cost to their business in order to make this happen. They understand it. I can't say they were real thrilled about it, but they understood the cost, which is, as I said, $192,000. A third option would be for the city to take this entire cost, $440,000, in excess of $440,000. And if so, we would then charge it all against the city's underground fund. We would not have to pay any cash at that time. It's $444,851 for those that are financially concerned about this. I look at one person in particular. If that's the case, we could then work with the property owners to say, you pay for the undergrounding of the CenturyLink lines in the area. Again, I do not know what that cost is. They have not provided that amount of money to us. So, Council, I ask your direction. We have three agreements that are legitimate. City Attorney has reviewed them and said, yes, they are in force. We have an estimate from Xcel Energy, which actually is a firm cost. This is one of the few times Xcel Energy says, here's our price, and that's what it's going to be regardless if it's higher or lower. We'd like to move forward with this project because Littleton Village developer is in the process of getting their plans ready for the Dry Creek Road project, and they do expect to have that construction to occur this year. I'll stop at that point. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to address them.
Council, I would just add that I think the agreements, as you're aware, are for them to pay 100%, and that's the starting place for this agreement. We do think that reducing that at a 50-50 split is something that's doable. You got to think about precedent that we might be setting with others, not that there's a legal precedent, but in terms of timing and all, not that these are long-term agreements, but the reality is so are covenants. When you buy that property, you do your research, and these come with it, and you agreed to that when that occurred, and so they are obligated to 100% of this. We have lots of undergrounding that we need to do. We do have, as Charlie mentioned, $3 million in our credit account, but that goes quickly, as you heard from these numbers. So this is not something we want to give away, but we do think that at maximum it should be a 50-50 split if you want to give them any credit on this.
Okay. Councilmember Stein.
Hey, Charlie, thanks for a great explanation. We've all read the exhibits, I'm sure. I have a quick question. Under Exhibit C, page 1, on what we have as page 9 of 11, it references the signatory party as being BDH&R Investment Company. Which of those three entities that you described as BD&H&R, if you know, that would have been either the Acura or, it's not Merchants, it's not the oil company, so it's either the shopping center or the Acura dealer. I suspect it's the shopping center.
That is the Acura dealership.
That is the Acura dealership. Yeah. I see in that under Section 1, talks about the owner for himself and his heirs, successors, and assigns, and I know that to be a very standard phrase. To the best of your knowledge, does such a phrase exist in the agreement with the original owner of the shopping center?
I believe the agreements are all very similar.
I would think it would be. Okay. Thank you. And the next question, I'm assuming there was some kind of a pro rata share that you established. Was that by square footage or frontage, or how did you determine who paid what share and for what reasons?
I did it based on lineal front footage. We took the $440,000 cost, and we calculated the front footage percentage of the whole cost to each property. We didn't think it was fair to give, for example, Merchants Oil all the cost for the work that they had to do on their property because they have to do some things that are beneficial to the other two. So I prorated it among the three based on front footage.
That's what I suspected. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
I just wanted to address Councilmember Stein's question. The Silo Corporation, is that the shopping center, Charlie?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, that agreement does have a provision in it that it's binding upon successors, assigns, and heirs, and it is a recorded document. So.
Thank you. And a follow-up sort of rhetorical question. These are all documents that would have been recorded. So to echo what you said, any prospective purchaser would have done a title search, and naturally any reasonable due diligence would have uncovered these obligations.
To clarify, 2 of the agreements were recorded. 1 is not, but that agreement is with the current owner.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Stalin.
Charlie, what do we normally expend from this fund on an annual basis on average?
About, it had to be at least 12, maybe 15 years ago, we spent $1 million of it to underground street light wires on Santa Fe Drive. That was the single biggest project I can recall. On occasion, we have done money where other developers have placed lines underground, and there may be a cost that's not assigned to a developer. And Xcel Energy would say, okay, what do we do with this small bit? We have placed underground in all the years we've been doing this, which is now over 20, some wires in locations where we felt it was in the best interest of the city to bury utility lines. I'm just trying to think of an example. Usually next to park and open spaces is where it's been used. We have not used this much in the last year, very, very little. I'm thinking that I can't even remember the last one, to be honest with you, at this point.
Incrementally, on an annual basis, how much does this fund increase, do you know?
Yeah, it's about $750,000, no more than that. $750,000 to $800,000 a year, plus we get to draw 3 years into the future revenues based upon the revenue of Xcel Energy.
Okay. And based on the projects that are ongoing other than Littleton Village, so I know there's Meadows and there's Littleton Commons and so forth and so on. I don't know if we did any of this with respect to Breck. Do you guys see a lot of incremental projects coming down the pike here that would consume a lot of this fund? I mean, I know the city manager indicated there's projects, but I'm curious if we're getting more each year and we can do some of this in advance. I'm just trying to put
Actually, the last time we used a lot of it was in this area on the east side of Grant behind Rocky Mountain Bottled Water and along the west side of the Oak Brook subdivision. We did an undergrounding project from Dry Creek Road all the way to the hospital. It was in partnership with the hospital, and that cost about $250,000 out of the fund.
Okay.
At the moment, I can't think of anything right offhand with current developments pending where we would, I'll tell you where it might be. It would be in the urban renewal areas. That would be the most logical place that we would do it, is on Littleton Boulevard or Broadway or some of those areas. The urban renewal will be the obvious location because there's many locations within urban renewal where there are overhead utilities that are affected. Let me point out, this only refers to Xcel Energy wires.
Right.
Now, in the Comcast agreement, they're required to bury once everybody else goes underground. CenturyLink does not have that requirement. The agreement with them dates back to 1962. And yes, that does predate even me.
Okay. And I guess if we were doing stuff in urban renewal areas, in theory, we could use TIF money for something like that.
You could.
Yeah.
I will tell you that, jump in here, $3 million is not much. I mean, you heard the number that Charlie just gave you tonight. So I think we have lots. I mean, when you drive around town, everything that's above ground, we ultimately want to get underground.
Right.
So if you're tying them to existing or new projects coming in, it could be limited. But if we were more proactive about it as we look into the forward and looking at some of these residential neighborhoods, to hear Charlie's numbers, we could eat that up in a year easily if we proactively went after different neighborhoods.
Is that
and started
something
to underground it?
We think is?
It's not currently planned, but I'm saying don't spend now anticipating that we're not going to do anything for a while.
I'm assuming the answer to this is no, but I'll ask, the impact fees we're collecting, this wouldn't qualify for consumption of those, would they?
It could help, but the cost of the transportation infrastructure is great enough that that's just helping with the roadway itself. And Littleton Village is a good example of this.
Right.
I mean, we're spending $1 million this year because of that project. So it's more than what we're getting from the impact fees from Littleton Village.
Okay.
To put it in perspective, that's $440,000 for basically 2 blocks.
Right.
But there's a lot of heavy-duty stuff up in the air there. And the cost to underground the CenturyLink lines needs to be considered. And that would be charged to the developers based upon the underground agreement.
Thanks.
Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah, just to kind of review my thoughts on this. So this is a perfect argument for why we would want urban renewal, because the public improvements that are done any type of area are so incredibly expensive that they would cause a developer to want to shy away unless there was some help coming. It seems to be a message we can't get out very easily, but this is a great example. But just working through this, there is a covenant or a codicil or some type of understanding with each of the property owners that this was something that could potentially be there, so they're informed and aware. Whatever we do here, I think, does begin to establish the just where's council at. It's no more than that, but it's a thought process or a way of thinking. And we're working with urban renewal, we're working with impact fees, we're working with these different things to try to find a way to have a balance between what we pay out of the taxpayers' general fund and what owners or those that profit by it pay. And so this is kind of where this decision is. It has to be done. It has to be done. I don't think we have a choice about that matter because, as I understand it, where they are now overhead is going to be roadway. So it's all going to be affected at some point there. So it's a has to, if I understand that. So we have to do it. And so I think, that thought process puts us to where our decision is. But I think my general feeling is that we want to do everything we can do within reason to encourage renewal and development of roadways, traffic, terrible roadways, Dry Creek. So I think there's a little bit of a public commitment to that and a public benefit to that. So whatever we decide here, I think there certainly is an opportunity here perhaps for something that negotiates, understanding that we're sort of setting a pattern.
Go ahead.
Peggy?
Go ahead,
Councilmember Cole. Go ahead.
So, downtown, this is just an aside, downtown, we've got above ground lines, right? And I thought I recalled in one of our council discussions in the last few years, possibly undergrounding downtown to be part of our spiffy re-energizing downtown, revitalizing. So that's going to take a hell of a lot more than we have right now, right?
Yeah, most of the power lines as well as telephone for the Main Street businesses are in the alley, either north or south of Main Street. The lines that are on above the sidewalk right on Main Street are actually street light wires as well as a dedicated circuit for just the holiday lights. The underground, all that would be extraordinarily expensive.
So
even in the alleys, you're talking about a lot of money because you have to bury it then to the buildings at each individual site. You're talking a huge amount of money.
So at one point, I thought we had talked of transforming our alleyways, energizing those with activities. So I'm not really eager to spend money if we have agreements, legal agreements otherwise, as much as it'd be nice to, but we're not rolling in money to be extra nice. I think we need to be fair and use our money carefully. So I think unless somebody else says something to sway me, I think this isn't persuading me.
Councilmember Valdez.
Thank you. So, Charlotte, are you using various contractors then to bury the...
Xcel Energy does all this through their own contractors. CenturyLink would do theirs, and Comcast has a contractor that would install their line.
So for the city, then it's just a matter of who pays it?
Yeah, we don't have anything to do with the construction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can I take another quick crack?
Quick.
We'll be quick. I want to thank Councilmember Beckman for bringing up a much needed and very key bit of information, because it is true moving forward we won't be able to exist without being able to use this TIF funds. However, to echo what Councilmember Cole said, these are valid, existing, and I might say long anticipated agreements that have been enforced for many times. There's no surprises here. There's when the folks who signed them, they knew this was coming. Here we are, so I'm very supportive of this measure.
So, Director Blossman, I have a couple questions. One is I'll draw a parallel on at least my life experience. Was bought a property that had a septic tank and a sewer line, was known to be in the future, wasn't necessarily scheduled, it was going to come at some point in time. And when we purchased the property, we had a recognition that the property value was going to be impacted because, in effect, you want to call it an assessment, comes because it's not necessarily at your time, although it does impact the property value itself. And so I just wanted to make sure that's where at least my life experience has been, which is, as Councilmember Stein pointed out, a known expense that's coming. It gets reflected somewhere in the consideration of what you're willing to pay for the property, and it's a known assessment of sorts, and I put that word in quotes at this point in time. So from that perspective, do we know or has anyone done an analysis on property values, these particular property values impacts by undergrounding? Because it's probably the fifth level of questions that I get is, when are we going to underground utilities in residential neighborhoods that exist, and when is the city going to take that on? And I said, when you and your neighbors want to take on the cost of having that done, we can certainly discuss a project. So that's been my discussion point so far on that. So if you can have any insight on property value impact, that would be interesting.
We have done no appraisal of the increased value of properties based upon the undergrounding. We're not appraisers. That would take a great amount of effort and cost to us to assess that. And no, I haven't done that, Mayor. I haven't touched that at all.
That was more of an interest question.
Yes.
on this. So other than it being an undesirable cost necessarily from the property values perspective, they were aware of them. This is something that's going to happen. They knew it was going to happen. And I can only agree with the city manager's comment that a $3 million allowance level that's been accumulated is a very small amount in the context of what undergrounding is needed on the part of the city. So, okay, thank you. Councilmember Stallman?
Just a clarification. You said this isn't cash. This is Xcel Energy bill credits.
Yes.
Okay, so we're not expending dollars. We're giving up future credits against Xcel Energy bills if we apply them here now.
That's the way it works.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no cash at all involved here.
Okay, all right, thanks. And I guess I'm going to suggest this. I think to where Councilmember Backman was going, I would be comfortable with offering up some sort of a negotiated arrangement here. I don't disagree with the comments that are being made about these being agreements that everybody was aware of, but I guess the other side of that coin is that the world today is a lot different than it was in 1985. The cost of doing this kind of stuff, the regulations, everything people have to go through from the standpoint of making these things happen is a lot different than just sending somebody out to dig a ditch and throw lines in it versus, who knows what it was like 30 some odd years ago. So the intent isn't to not hold people accountable for agreements they entered into at arm's length, which is, of course, what happened here. But again, to Bruce's point, if we can do something to mitigate and not cost ourselves a lot of money and continue to try to put the welcome mat out for businesses that are investing capital in the city, I think that makes a lot of sense.
One other comment or question that I'll ask, which is one of the things that was done when the sewer line was installed is the city that I was in. It wasn't Littleton at this point in time, but they actually helped have credit available to the property owners so that any item that they didn't necessarily have cash for was done at a very attractive rate because it was kind of a bulk component. Has the city looked into any kind of financing support or group element that might be available?
I can tell you what we've done in the past on similar projects. We have not looked into credit financing on this one. We're not a credit operation. We're not a loan company. But in the past, when we have done street improvement projects and we upfront the money, I'll pick a number of $500,000 for a street improvement project, and everybody that owns property on that street might have to pay $10,000. We would then say, you can do that within 3 years and pay us in installments. We're going to upfront it, but you're going to pay us back in 3 years. And there would be a signed agreement to that extent. We have done that on street improvement projects in the past. For street lighting, we have not done any approach like that at all.
And I was just going to suggest that as a midpoint between the two views that are being made up there, which is we can front it and then whatever the interest rate is, or no interest if that's what you choose on some period of time, you can leave that up to us administratively to work out the details. Ensure that we get 100% of it back to handle those that want to see that money, but essentially do it under a loan format under 5 years, et cetera, as a compromise.
Question? Sure. Councilmember Beckman.
Just to add to the discussion of this, Charlie, when you did that with the homeowners, did you have to establish an actual taxing district for
yes.
that?
We had a special improvement district for each of those.
Is that how you would protect it, or is that not what we do?
No, we just do a simple loan repayment agreement that we would record it and then put a lien on the property if they didn't pay us. We'd be eighth in line in some of the cases, but not overly concerned. I mean, in this case and Councilman, you bring up a good question. I mean, what we're talking about businesses in this circumstance, which, if I can stereotype or make an assumption, they are more likely able to pay these costs. There's other ones of these agreements that we have that were done by developers that are sitting there as well, which homeowners, to Councilman or Mayor Sinanic's comment, where the homeowners are going to be a lot more upset, and these numbers are going to be percentage-wise more significant to them and come out of their personal pocketbook. Not that it doesn't come out of business pocketbooks either. But I do think that the idea of the loan repayment might be something that everyone can agree to.
Well, I just try to think back also to the 1980s and, what was going on at that location at that time. And as somebody alluded to believe that would be a 4-lane road, from edge of easement to edge of easement kind of thing, and that everything would have to be totally rebuilt, totally redesigned, and totally redone, that's to the public's interest. That's because we have 100,000 more people south of us and that kind of traffic generated. So I don't want to miss in this discussion that this impact is part of life in Littleton and is a public issue.
It is in this circumstance, but there's other locations. I mean, it's our ordinance to underground utilities now. And it's not just us. I mean, it is standard in Colorado and across the nation to underground utilities. So another example would be Ridge and Prince. We're working with a developer at Ridge and Prince, and there's a requirement as part of their project that they have to underground the utilities in that place as well. And that was signed prior to the current person who owns it. Can't think of the name. And they're working with us right now to say, well, when do I have to? Do I have to do it? Do I do it all the way across the street? Those kind of things. So this is not just because of more traffic or more people in here. This is a goal of undergrounding utilities for quality of life, aesthetic issues, property values, all of those other things. And it's why I think Mayor Sinanik mentioned, he gets asked by people about residential undergrounding. So you take this conversation and you're going to have to put it into a residential neighborhood where some developer signed it in the 80s or whatever the example might be that says you're going to underground it. We now come along and say, okay, it's time to underground it. And the same conversation is going to occur. So and you're not setting a precedent. I mean, you certainly can say in this circumstances we're going to do something because it's predicated from a timing issue that we don't have control over because of Littleton Village as opposed to an established neighborhood that we can say, look, in 3 years from now we're going to get to it and we want you to start putting some money away because we're going to charge you 75%, 50%, 100% of what the agreement was. But not discounting it, there's definitely impacts of growth, but this has many other variables as well.
Councilmember Stein again.
Really quickly, to echo on what the mayor said, we're not talking about residential development here. We're talking about people who, and I, disclosure, I'm not well, but I am passingly familiar with the ownership of the service station, both former and current. These are very sophisticated business people. They're building these service stations across the state, maybe even across the country. These guys know what they're doing. They run, as Councilmember Stallman would know easily, they run these pro formas, they run them out, they hope for the best, they plan for the worst. This is not a shock to these guys. They know it's coming. And I am a little concerned about setting a precedent, whereas we have what I see as a very black and white binding agreement, and I'm concerned. I would not be adverse to maybe not doing some financing, but perhaps scheduling out the payments to an point. But I'm kind of a bargain is a bargain. Everybody knows about it. Everybody's always known about it. So that's where I'm standing.
Yes, so there's actually two questions in front of us. One is first to collect it, okay, which is what we have stated. The second is it anything less than 100% that we're looking to collect, or what kind of terms might we be willing to say or consider at this point in time? I'll put myself out and then look for a possible motion, which is if we did something like a 5-year no-interest payment plan, but recognize the costs is theirs, that would be something that I might consider well, but I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion, and then we can talk about amending it. I move to approve the resolution authorizing city staff to collect funds from 3 property owners to pay their respective share of the costs of undergrounding existing utility lines along the south side of East Dry Creek Road.
Second.
Okay. So, council, we have a motion and a second. Discussion.
My only concern is that Excel, I know when I had gone to them to put my utilities underground, they were going to charge in excess of $5,000 just to go from pole to my house. It was over $5,000, and it'd be similar for yours as well. When I had a contractor come out to do the same specs, it was about $500. So I am a little concerned about the pricing that Excel is doing for this. That's my only concern.
Councilmember Stallman?
I'll make a motion to amend to basically collect 75% and allow staff to negotiate acceptable financing arrangements at their discretion.
Is that your motion?
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Is that kind of two different things, really?
Well,
just yeah.
I can split
I'd kind of
it.
like to break it up, if you don't mind.
That'd be fine.
Okay.
All right. So, friendly?
Yeah.
70. Move to amend the motion to approve authorizing city staff to collect 75% of the funds.
I agree.
Okay. So we have a motion to amend the main motion. Council, any discussion at this point in time? So
No discussion. And there's no consideration for a time payment or anything like that?
Not yet. In this piece.
Okay.
this is on the two pieces, this is decide what's the share component. So the amendment is to, rather than 100%, is to collect from the property owners 75%. Is that correct? Okay. So, council, we have a motion to amend to be something less than 100%, to be at 75% to collect from the property owners. Additional discussion? Council ready to vote?
The vote is 3 in favor, with council members Cole, Cernanek, Brinkman, and Stein voting no. The motion fails.
Then the second tranche of the motion would be to authorize staff to negotiate with the property owners discretionary financing arrangements for now the 100% that's being collected.
Can I offer a little piece in looking for the city manager on that, which is the city would not finance it. It's to schedule a payment schedule. So if we make that, is that
correct?
Okay.
Correct. Financing means just payments over time. Right. If interest is applicable, that's fine.
I do have a question for the city manager.
Wait a second. We're looking for a second on them. Okay, so we have a second on that. Discussion.
Sorry, city manager again. I'd rather not lose money on this deal if we're going to finance it. Do we have a cost of funds that comes to mind?
Well, I think, as you heard from Director Bloston, these are credits from Excel.
I see, okay.
And so I'd have to look in, but I don't believe that they're giving us interest on those credits. So assuming that, he's shaking his head no. So I think that those dollars are hard and they're not growing on an interest basis. So again, to minimize the cost and try to reach agreement amongst the 7 of you, I think we could do it at a no interest, workout based upon, no more than 5 years or something like that, something that's reasonable, and we assure that we get those funds back.
So if I understand the motion correctly, we're not imposing a specific minimum or maximum. We're saying if staff can, in staff's sole and subjective discretion, negotiate something that's acceptable, we're not telling them they have to negotiate something. It has to be acceptable to them. In other words,
if they want to pay, if the businesses want to pay it off.
Sure.
Right.
They can pay it off. It'd be more if the shopping center came in and said, hey, could we do this on a 5-year? We weren't planning this. We were going to do a new facade this year. Could we do a 5-year repayment? Yeah. You guys would be giving us discretion to negotiate that.
Bullet in the holster kind of thing. I mean, I wouldn't even wait for them to ask, but I'd say I'd throw it out there if they want to, offer them a couple, 2-3 years is, again, trying to be user-friendly kind of thing.
No, I totally agree. I just didn't want to, in the event that hypothetically, one of the owners were to say, yeah, we'll pay, over 200 years or something like that. I don't want to tie their hands. So we're authorizing them to work it out to at their discretion, and if they can't work out something that's acceptable, then they won't.
So,
right. And if you want to put a cap on it, I mean, you're more than welcome to it 5 or 7 years, 10 years, whatever you feel is appropriate.
Up to 5 years would be fine with me.
I'm good with that.
Councilmember Cole?
So I'm not thinking they're going to go out of business, but what if they sell?
We would record this as a lien on the property, so it would go with any sale. It's a common thing. It's not I don't have a concern about it.
I know. I'm hearing you don't. I'm just hearing that we have things that were in agreements and so forth. People buy them, and they bought, understanding something, and then we wind up changing. So.
Well, yeah, your base, and that's why I said the base agreement here is that they are going to pay 100%, and they're going to pay it when we say that we're doing the work. I think this is less of an impact in terms of a sale, because if I have an agreement with the city and I sell my property to you, we're in an active payment plan. So that's going to get recorded. It's going to show up. It's not going to be some imaginary number that's unknown, some unknown time in the future. It's going to be you're paying $10,000 a month or a year for the next 5 years, and it's going to show right up there. So this is not going to be a repeat of 1980 popping. 1980 popping into 2015.
Councilmember Beckman.
Is this something that we would be able to see in future budgets? How would this be accounted for?
So my thought is, because it's for undergrounding, that we would put it in a restricted in quotes, because it's not a Tabor or enterprise fund, but we would put it in a revenue account for undergrounding only. so that those dollars, because that's the intent of what the council is collecting those funds for, and so it would go into a utility account fund, which finance would keep, and then when we went to underground projects, stop talking with my hands, we would pull from this account, and council would obviously decide that we wanted to use the credits from Excel first or use our cash first.
I was thinking about the Tabor piece, too.
It's actually an exchange of asset with liability and asset. That's a different qualification.
Yeah.
Right. I want to make a comment that for those that may be concerned, allowing for a payment schedule that doesn't necessarily require it up front is a friendly treatment on this, as opposed to the businesses themselves, the property owners themselves, having to go out and look at either a financing agreement or come up with the cash. So I consider this a favorable treatment on that. Council, the motion before us with a second is to allow for payment schedules with a guidance up to 5 years. Accounting treatment will allow for, or the guidance around accounting is to have it restricted to the undergrounding utilization. So any questions on the motion? Okay, council seeing none. Council ready to vote? And again, this is an amendment to the main motion.
The vote is 6 in favor, with Councilmember Cole voting no. The motion carries.
Okay. Council, we now have the main motion, which is to allow for the city to collect the funds. We have an amendment that allows for payment schedules with guidance for accounting and timeframes. Any additional discussion? So seeing none, the council ready to vote?
The vote is unanimous. The motion carries.
Thank you, council. That is our last agenda item for consideration this evening. It's now roughly 7:52 p.m. 30 seconds. Okay. We're adjourned. Again, to everyone that's here, Happy New Year, and let's celebrate our quasi-centennial.
Not tonight, but I was